Hello, this is Stephen Nojiri, and this is another Tada Genji Tradition video. In this video, we're going to continue this review of the Tada Genji Tradition. In part 1, we looked at the Tada Genji tradition specifically, starting with the Jingunden and Tada Manju. Now we're going to take a look specifically at the Kusunoki tradition. Kusunoki tradition is part of the Tada Genji tradition, but it's also an important piece because it played a major part in the Southern court and it influenced many samurai scholars during the 1600s. So, the Kusunoki tradition. Kusunoki Masashige was a student of the Tada Genji tradition and the Oe Genji tradition. This is well documented in numerous historical sources. And the Kusunoki, so there may be some people who wish to refute that, but it's pretty much well established and locked in. So moving on, the Kusunoki were a samurai family from Kawachi that were originally tasked by the Hojo shoguns to police and control over the Kawachi area. However, when Emperor Go-Daigo asked Masashige to join him to fight against the Hojo shoguns, the Kusunoki clan, which is actually the Kusunoki are also the Wada. So that entire clan gave their loyalty to the emperor and they stopped serving the Hojo shoguns. So similar to the part 1 video, up on your screen you're going to see a visual representation of the Kusunoki school, Kusunoki-ryu, Kusunoki tradition breakdown. At the top you're going, and again it goes from the oldest is at the top, then middle, then youngest at the bottom. So you have Kusunoki and his original teachings in red. That gives rise to the Kusunoki family tradition in green. That also gives rise to related family traditions, such as the parts of the family, the Wada part of the clan, or the Onchi retainers, etc., etc. So there are the Wada family tradition or the Onchi family tradition come from the Kusunoki, but they're not the Kusunoki main family. That's why the original, so Masashige and his original teachings are in red, and then the Kusunoki family tradition is in green, and related families are in gray. That's technically three different traditions, but they're all influenced by each other. Then in purple, we have non-main Kusunoki traditions. So the Kusunoki clan has multiple lines. You have the main line, and then you have lesser lines. So the green box is really for the main line and those sort of branches that are close to the main line. And then as you get farther away from the main line, you get the purple box. The non-main Kusunoki traditions are the far branch Kusunoki family members and what they're doing. Then in yellow you have the Imagawa clan, or the Imagawa. There's a guy named Imagawa Nyodo in the late 1400s. Now the Imagawa were northern supporters, and the Imagawa were very hypercritical of the Taiheki. They actually produced a document called the Non-Taiheki, which was a criticism of the Taiheki in the early 1400s. But Imagawa Nyodo, by the late 1400s, is very pro-Kusunoki, and he's influenced by a lot of these the non-main Kusunoki tradition and also what he knows about the main Kusunoki tradition. And he sort of gathers a lot of this knowledge and he creates a Taiheki commentary in the late 1400s. That commentary, and there is another commentary which is done by the Wada family, the gray box. I forgot to draw the line on here. But anyway, these commentaries create what's in orange. That's called the Taiheki-ryu, based on these two main commentaries. That actually is not, that's considered a Kusunoki-ryu. It's called Kusunoki-ryu or Kusunoki Taiheki-ryu or Taiheki-ryu. That actually doesn't involve the main Kusunoki line at all. It's really the material collected from the Imagawa and from these non-main Kusunoki traditions. In blue, you see Fuden's Kusunoki-ryu or Kusunoki Fuden's-ryu. This is known as Kusunoki-ryu. This is also called Nanki-ryu. This is also the tradition that was inherited by Yui Shosetsu. So Kusunoki Fuden's Kusunoki-ryu or Yui Shosetsu's Nanki-ryu, Fuden's Nanki-ryu, etc., etc. Now, That's in blue because that is influenced by, you'll see the green line has a little bit of white around it. It's influenced by teachings from the Kusunoki main line, but it's not the inheritor of the teachings of the main line. And it is also influenced by the non-main Kusunoki traditions. And then finally, the last one to sort of appear, so to speak, is the Aizu domain's Kusunoki-ryu. Now there's a Kusunoki-ryu out of the Aizu domain, and they're a specific one. The way that each one of these schools writes Kusunoki, has a tendency to write Kusunoki differently. So like, for example, the Kusunoki Fuden school, they sometimes say Kusunoki, sometimes they say Nanki. They write it Southern Tree, Nanki. And then the Aizu domain's Kusunoki sometimes uses only a single kanji instead of Kusunoki. They technically just they write it in a way where it doesn't have the second kanji, just the first kanji. But the reason they do that is because they're heavily influenced by one of the non-main Kusunoki lines, which took up the tradition of writing Kusunoki with only a single kanji in the name. So you have all of these different versions of Kusunoki-ryu. So when you say Kusunoki-ryu, you have to sort of be very mindful that each one of these Kusunoki, there's many different Kusunoki-ryus, and each one of them has their own unique history and their own documents, etc., etc. But I want you, before we change, I want you to look at this main arrow, and I want you to see that the Kusunoki main family tradition doesn't actually manifest as a school. And we'll go into that in a second. But before we go into that, let's take a look at the documents. So, in red, from the 1300s to the 1450s, those are your first documents. And they're in red because they're associated with the Kusunoki and his original teachings. And the star could also be in green as well because it's that main line. So those are the main Kusunoki documents. Then in yellow, you have these sort of second documents, that second generation of documents, sort of highlighted by the Imagawa commentaries. And then in the blue, the third level, you have like Kusunoki Fuden's documents or Yui Shosetsu's documents. And then finally the gray star, the fourth generation of documents, that would be like those would be the late Kusunoki documents, 1650s beyond, the Aizu domain's documents, things that were sort of published publicly, etc., etc. So let's take a look at some of that. The Kusunoki Kaden. So I say this all the time, Kusunoki Kaden. What am I referring to? When I say Kusunoki Kaden, I'm referring to documents written by Kusunoki Masashige and his sons and grandsons. The documents coming from that first period from 1330 to 1450. So there's for example, there's a document called the 7 Documents of the Kusunoki Family. But that is not what I'm referring to when I say the Kaden. That document is from the 1690s. It's a collection of 7 individual documents. Some of them are from the Kaden, but some are from Imagawa Nyodo. Remember, he's a student of the tradition in the 1470s, and he's the one whose writings started the Taiheki-ryu. So the 7 documents of the Kusunoki family contains some of the Kusunoki mainline Kaden family, or Kaden means family tradition, but it doesn't contain all of it, and it also contains some documents from the Taiheki-ryu. So that's not what I mean when I say Kaden. When I say Kusunoki Kaden, I mean the family writings between 1330 and 1450. So there are dozens and dozens of Kusunoki-ryu documents because remember, there are multiple Kusunoki-ryu schools, and each school has, its own collection of documents. So dozens and dozens of documents from Kusunoki-ryu schools. So you need to know which lineage wrote them, why they were written, when they were written, and who was the intended audience of the text. And so to break it down again, you have the original Kusunoki Kaden, which is a certain collection of teachings and documents. Then you have the Taiheki commentaries, which is the foundation of Taiheki-ryu. Then the Aizu domain Kusunoki-ryu's documents. Now those are written around 1600, or written in the 1600s. So some of these documents are from the 1300s, early 1400s. Some are from the later 1400s and the 1500s. Some of them are absolutely, undeniably written in the 1600s, such as the Aizu domain Kusunoki Ryu. You have Kusunoki Rugun Gaku, or aka Nankiru, that's Kusunoki Fuden School. It's based on the Kaden and another 1400 and 1500s documents, but the school's documents are written by Fuden and Yui Shosetsu in the 1600s. You also get a lot of, after the Kien Revolt, after the fall of Yui Shosetsu, you get a lot of Kusunoki documents that are published by people that have been trained in it. They have the document. The school has fallen apart. So what they do is they just combine whatever they have into these amalgamated collections and then publish those collections. So you see a lot of that post 1650. And beyond that, you have dozens of documents written by non-mainline Kusunoki families which never became schools. So remember what I said. Like the main Kusunoki tradition, the main line, the one in green, that never became a school. So the actual tradition of the Kaden never became an actual school. Kusunoki Fuden did use the Kaden in his school, but that wasn't the main line. That was a branch line. You also, as I said, and then you have, like I said, dozens of families who have been, they have some training or some exposure to the Kusunoki tradition, but they never opened a Kusunoki school. So for example, the Momonoi Naotsune line of Kusunoki tradition, it has its own sort of trainings and tradition and documents, but it was never a formal school that was opened. So not only was Kusunoki Masashige trained in the Tada Genji tradition himself, but many of these quote-unquote never opened as a school families were Tada Genji clans that were trained in Tada Genji tradition, and they were also trained and influenced in the Kusunoki Kaden, and this formed this self-evolving feedback loop over time. And we see this self-evolving feedback loop within those families' written documents and histories. So for example, we find teachings of the Kusunoki Kaden in Tada Genji families pre-1600. We also find Jingunden teachings in the Kusunoki Kaden, but we also find those teachings and Kusunoki Kaden teachings in the Jingunden documents, which are pre-1600s as well. Ironically, some of the most earliest and compelling documents come from those families that never opened schools, but simply retained their knowledge in their own family and their own family's documents and their own family traditions. So, as one's study of the Tada Genji increases in its depth, one is compelled to study and learn the Kusunoki Kaden, as it unquestionably intertwines with the Jingunden and the Oboshiden. In future videos and publications, I will show several teachings which are found in both traditions, and I will show how they overlap and how they intertwine. And I'm also planning on showing how this interaction takes place prior to the 1600s, as researchers, not just me, have already found this evidence to date to the period between 1470 and 1570. And in closing, because I know that there are Shinobi no Mono lovers in the crowd. I know how many of you viewers are very much interested in Shinobi first and foremost. So for you, I will tell you that there absolutely does exist Kusunoki tradition documents of the proper Shinobi prior to the 1600s. So that is samurai spies being called Shinobi pre-1600s in the documents. The documents are pre-1600. That absolutely exist. This information is already been published in Japan by other Kusunoki researchers. It's only a matter of time before it becomes well known in the ninja community that Kusunoki Shinobi predate the 1600s. Again, it's already been published. It's done, but it's just taking time for this knowledge to get out. So, With that in mind, with all that having been said, please continue to watch future videos and learn about the Tada Genji and the Kusunoki traditions. Thank you.